Dr. Das, one of the first questions that jumps out is, at a time that you did, and especially for women, taking up sports medicine as a specialization, how did that happen?
When I passed out MBBS and did my first post graduation in maternity and child health, there was no approved course offered by any Indian university in India. And I had ample love for sports and academics together. And then I was a sportswoman myself. Then, when I saw an advertisement from an Indian university in my city to offer a course, first ever course in sports medicine, I promptly took admission in that course and finished it successfully. And since I was the only woman in that batch to pass out, automatically became the first lady sports medicine specialist and one of the first sports qualified sports medicine specialists in the country.
Dr. Das, you've undoubtedly had a illustrious, sterling career for such a long time. Um, you know, um, I understand that you've had stints in Russia as well as a scientist, and you've had the privilege to be associated with the Sports Authority of India. Could you walk us a little bit through that journey of your illustrious career?
After obtaining my second sports graduation in sports medicine, after a few months, I was offered a job in Sports Authority of India, and I was an automatic choice in that post. Then it was one of its first of its kind in the organization, also in the country. So it has a great demand, and I had to formulate the pathway. There was no job specification given to me on platter. I have worked for 26 years in Sports Authority of India, and on different times, depending on the job specification, I had to undertake many pathways. One of them was my work in Central Institute for Research in Sports in Moscow, in erstwhile USSR, where Government of India and SAI deputed me to work in a scientist exchange program. I worked there and worked on a field which was not available in India at that time, that is muscle biopsy in sports. Secondly, I was deputed to Bangladesh to establish its first ever sports medicine infrastructure and to prepare the course curriculum and run the first course for human training in sports medicine in Dhaka and Jahangirnagar universities.
Right.
So I was there for about 1.5 years, and I had to start the department from the grassroots level, from the very beginning, to make it an established running sports medicine center. And after that, I had to go to Birmingham in National uh, Institute of Sports in UK for a short postgraduate course in sports medicine. And at that time, the dope lab of London was being refurbished. And I got the opportunity to go through it about the changes, about the functioning of dope lab. And after returning from there, I submitted my report to ministry, and it was gladly accepted and implemented in our dope lab, which is there in JN Stadium, New Delhi, it, which was actually being established at that time. As a scientist, I had to work on thousands and thousands lakhs of children from Eastern India to document and decide on the expected growth, expected body structure, of Indian children, because there are a lot of difference in West and in India about the child growth and their potentials. So
Right.
we have taken part in that big research which was continuing throughout India, and I was actually responsible for the eastern part because I was over the eastern region. So that was another scientific project, big one. And there are so many projects like uh, human mechanics, mechanics of movement.
Right.
And yeah, and I had to establish our physiology lab, human performance lab, biomechanics lab, psychology, sports psychology lab, everything. It began with me in Eastern region.
How do you see, over the years, the development and acceptance of the science of sports medicine in both elite sports as well as non-elite sports, especially in the latter part of the question? Could you please elaborate how much attention is being paid to non-elite athletes as opposed to even elite athletes?
Actually, Sai always had a program for non-elite athletes to select and find out potential athletes from the grassroots level at a very young age.
Hmm.
And we started with that. And after thousands and thousands of children reporting to us for testing and training, we have taken up, adopted those children in our adopted schools and hostels. We give them all facilities like trained coaches, infrastructure, chances to participate in sports competitions, the kits, everything.
Right.
And uh, for years we went through it. And there was one time when it was in prime, and all Indian teams, including hockey, football, women football, everything, they had at least 70 to 80% of team members who belonged to Sai originally,
Right.
groomed by Sai. But that program is not there anymore. It has changed into a different version, and everything is going on, but the laboratories are even well equipped, but human resources are less and less. Like we are retiring, but there is no other qualified person who is taking up the
Right.
mandate. Yeah.
So, having said that, and having made the necessary investments, and you know, irrespective of what the nature of the program is,
Hmm.
we still see, for example, whether it is injury management or whether it is recovery management, that is still a suspect, in terms of when you compare it to the rest parts of the world. For example, someone like Neeraj Chopra, he could not participate in the previous Olympics because he had just gotten
Yeah.
injured before that in an international event, and he could not make
Hmm.
it in time for the Olympics. So, literally, perhaps India lost an opportunity of getting a javelin gold 4 years before. I mean, we can speculate, but I'm saying that we have any number of such cases at the elite level itself, and I'm
Hmm.
sure that there are multiple more at the non-elite level. So why is it that we are not able to manage this better in our country?
There are two sides of the story. Like you specified on Neeraj Chopra, because there was one time when Sushmita Singhara, the famous heptathlete Olympian, she was due for World Athletic Championship, that is no less than Olympics, to be
Right.
held in Rome, and she felt sick. Actually, I was there in charge, and I tested her. I clinically I had a suspicion, and I confirmed it by investigation, and I found her to be suffering from acute appendicitis.
Okay.
And she was due in 6 to 7 weeks to go for Rome.
Right.
Then then I had to plan very quickly because these chances never come many times. So, consulting with his coach, Dronacharya coach, yes, Kuntal Rai, I took him to a um, center which does it by machine, arthroscopy, like uh,
Right.
endoscopy. So she was operated immediately, and she was she has taken the rehabilitational recovery procedures according to my advice, and she was actually able to participate in the World Athletic Meet. What you said is right, that there are dearth of qualified persons. People
Right.
are not being appointed in the places, and who are appointed are part timers who are maybe ordinary MBBS or a retired ESI person. They have no idea about sports medicine. So they are not bothered with sports. They don't know that demands of various sports, specific demands. So they don't know the athletics. They don't know the doping problems. These people are not really uh, able to uh, justify, diagnose their actions.
Also, different sports, even in the sports medicine category. I know from our past conversations that you have practically held, done, or managed various branches of the sports medicine. But as you rightly point out, that these require specializations, whether it is from a musculoskeletal part of it, a therapy part of it. Can you talk about the challenges that you have faced, despite the fact that you might have managed them for lack of resources, as you say, the disciplined approach to different sports and
Right.
how you have been able to meet those challenges?
It is not only the lack of resources. Maybe if the resources are spent justifiably, it can serve a lot many sports persons in the right way, proper way.
Right.
But what happens? There is one great thing called attitude.
Right.
Attitude of the persons who are at the helm of the activities, who are the administrators and managers, who take the decisions in an air conditioned room,
Right.
but they don't know what is happening in the field, what is happening to the sports person, what is happening to the doctors or the
Right.
treatment other personnel.
Right.
So what happens sometimes, like I was in my center and the national football camp came to that center
Right.
before going to going for a Asian championship qualifying. Legendary PK came to me and said, all these players are playing for the clubs, you know, and they are totally exhausted.
Right.
In We have only 6 weeks. Can you make them fit for the Asian championship, international championship? I said, if you listen to me, if you follow my directions, I can take a chance. And then I program their nutrition, their rest time, their practice time, and their recovery procedures, which was followed internationally. And these people were very happy. By the end of the camp, when they were ready for the show, they fit and in their prime. So PK went to before going, we went to Delhi for a meeting where the team doctor, team officials, others would be selected. And he was so excited, he proposed my name. And or one of my bosses, he knew me perfectly well. He knew how qualified I am. He knew I'm an author of textbook of sports medicine. He knew everything. He knew about my career. He said, how can she go? It is a male team. And look, if I were there in the meeting, I would have asked him, you can give me 6 weeks times with the camp, male camp team. But you cannot spare 15 days abroad with them during competition. Long before, when the Nehru Cup was here, the Brazil doctor was a lady, the Argentinian doctor was a lady. You know, they never bothered and see their performance. In my case, it was not there because of our attitude, the Indian attitude. So there are so many things like gender bias, like nepotism, because I have my niece or nephew to go for the thing. He may be a radiologist, but he will accompany the team.
Right.
Yeah, it has happened in Olympics also.
Yes.
And there is politics. These are the challenges that we had to face.
Which brings me to
Yeah.
the question: how athletes respond to a women sports specialist, and especially, is there any couple of incidents that you can relate of elite athletes? How, and I know that there are
And
many elite athletes who work with you. So can you speak
no,
about a
no,
couple
no.
of experiences?
No. I have nothing to say against the athletes because I'm so happy to work with them and they are so happily trust me in everything that I in throughout my career I have never faced a problem from their side. Even the team went to UK football team again senior football team
Right.
and the doctor was another one, not me. From UK, somebody called me to ask about his injury there because they trusted me.
So one of the things that we are working at Giggr as a platform is to be able to bring the right kind of world class attention through an
Mhm,
ecosystem to a non elite athlete, um,
mhm,
and be able to work in terms of, from anywhere. For example, like you said, an athlete called
mhm,
you all the way from the UK because they connected with you at a certain level. They knew
mhm.
that when they came to you, they would get the right advice, right?
Right.
And so this is the concept that we are working at, is to be able to connect the right kind of curate and contextualize the entire ecosystem, whether it is from a sports medicine, coaching, training, therapy, nutrition, even psychological and emotional support, right?
Mhm.
In order for someone to be able to perform, uh, not only perform, stay motivated, and be able to accomplish their aspirations. What do you think of a concept like this?
This is a great concept because, see, if without any boundaries, we can connect the right person with the right care seeker or help seekers, it would be the most proper thing to do in sports nowadays. Because see, the elite athletes, they are mm, well paid, well equipped to ask for help from elite doctors and services from abroad also.
Right,
But these non-elite aspiring sports persons, they don't have that. They
right,
can only seek help from the local areas or from the inside the country,
right,
and they cannot afford anything else. So if they know, they become aware of the right person in the field, person, not only persons,
right,
they will be most benefited. And
right.
people who are ready to help them, the trained people like trained coaches, trained nutritionists, trained physiologists, trained doctors, that would be a boon to aspiring sports persons, and that will be a help for their building their careers.
So, what would be your advice for us in terms of motivating professionals um, who have to also understand that, the sports have changed dramatically in terms of the speed, in terms of the endurance, and in terms of the stakes with the sports. Earlier, sports was played more for the joy of it. Today, it's a business. It's a commercial venture, right? So the
Mhm,
stakes have changed completely, which means that the entire ecosystem that is supporting them has to be very relevant to the techniques, to the tools that they use. how would you recommend, that professionals they engage in such a way that they become relevant rather than using techniques and tools and methods that they might have known many years ago and continue to thrive or survive on it?
That's where the question of competent and qualified persons come.
Right,
It, the experience is also another thing, but these people, they have to work from themselves also. They have
right,
to have their own business, some remuneration. So all on a charity, it's not possible.
right,
So government and corporates, private organizations, they should come up and try to support these persons who are really ready to help the sports persons, and
right,
where by whose care the sports persons will be benefited. So there
true,
is a gap. There is a gap between the connection. You can name them that, yeah, so and so doctor is very good, you go there, but you have to see whether he can afford his her fees,
right,
or he should travel that way that long to visit her. So here comes the support from
right.
the external agencies. So
Absolutely.
I
And Giggr, the platform, is actually geared to facilitate that process of making that care available,
Mhm.
in whichever way it is possible, whether an individual can afford it or through help that can be generated through the ecosystem.
True, 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 true.
So, Doctor, one final question as we, go through this wonderful conversation and try to bring it to a loop is
Mm,
we are transitioning through a phase in India where
mm,
sports is being taken up more seriously. So even the attitude of parents is shifting. What Giga sees as a future is
mm,
if there are sports people or young sports aspirants who are good at what sport they have chosen, then
mm,
they should focus on the sport. So instead of spending meaningless time in a classroom for 8 hours, they should spend time on
mm,
sport for 8 hours. I'm not saying they should not get educated, but
mm,
the 80-20 rule of spending 8 hours on sports and 2 hours on education should
mm.
perhaps become the norm. How do you see this, doctor, in terms of the socio political environment shifting this way in which our pedagogy is arranged, the way in which we
Mm.
shift our attitudes, and if we aspire to become a sporting nation, then how do we create the right environment for sports people and the sports ecosystem?
Actually, world is changing, and sports is very rewarding now. If they choose it as a career, they should be very serious about it. And at par with international sports centers, I have seen it in Russia, in Germany, in USA, that the people are taking up sports at a very young age, when the studies should be there. They should spend some time on that. That has been beautifully managed. Time management is the essence of the whole thing. Sometimes open schools, sometimes private tutors.
Right,
That way the education is also continued.
right,
And this system is followed somewhat in India for elite sports like tennis. I've seen many tennis players who have enrolled in open schools and
right,
are not going through regular classroom studies.
right,
Like, I can name a few. This is Shibika Burman. There was Leander Page. There are so many sports persons. But you have to see another thing. This is only possible when you have a financial and other supports around. They are
right,
from good families. They have got good sponsors, and they can spend full time in sports that way. But Everybody cannot do it. So we have to try to synchronize the whole system so
Right.
that even the less privileged sports persons also can take help of this ecosystem, this uh, system of uh, merging education with sports and sports with education. Here also the role of Giggr and some like-minded institution organizations and some benevolent corporates and private donors come into picture.
Dr. Das, thank you so much. This was a truly inspiring conversation. We thank you so much as a nation for the services that you have rendered and look forward to continuing that spirited offering that you have to make to all of us. Thank you so much, Dr. Das.
Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to open up about my past experience and visions. And I hope we can in future work jointly on these matters. Thank you.
Thank you so much.